Okay, so it is 9 o'clock. We are streaming on YouTube. Thank you all for coming, or however you want to describe it. I think it's much easier to hold class here than going down to Jersey City, and we could do the same thing. So our discussion today is going to revolve around classroom management, and specifically with the Scott Donovan case study that I'd ask you to look at. So I'm sorry, I'm getting background noise from somebody. Someone's got a TV on or something. I'm hearing something in the background. Got it. So somebody want to tell me about Scott Donovan, who he is and what's his problem?
I'll tell you about Scott Donovan.
Go ahead, Melissa.
So he's a second career guy, and he was originally an editor, and he teaches multiple level high school English classes. The article focused on his sophomore English class. He was reading, I think, 6 novels with them. He got through 2, and he was on his 3rd novel. He assigned this journal project to go along with the novel, and I believe 2 or 3 of the kids, or maybe even 4, plagiarized. And he was, I guess, exasperated. He didn't understand how students could do this. But unfortunately, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I've seen it before so many times.
Okay.
And he just thought his writing assignment was going to be so great because he'd be able to see all his students' styles of writing, and he'd be able to help them with, you know, their composition and their grammar and their, I guess their style of writing. And the project failed for him, basically.
Why do we think it failed?
Because I think he had different expectations than what his students had. And if he was upfront with his students and told them why he was doing the project, I mean, maybe they would have written differently.
Perhaps. You don't think he was upfront with them? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I think the big flaw was that there were no checks along the way. He just wanted to see all 10 chapters at the end. And if he maybe checked to see that the journals were coming along, maybe every 3 or 4 that were due, you wouldn't have the kids. He did warn them about not putting it all off till the end, and you don't want to do 10 journal entries the night before. And warnings are nice, but with teenagers, it doesn't really sink in most of the time. You kind of got to force the checks, I think, along the way.
Okay. I agree. Keep going. Who else? I'm holding my opinion.
I think like maybe you would just. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that he may have overshot the amount of work that he was given. Seemed like a lot of reading for that grade, and so I think he was maybe rethinking that also, toward the end, after he saw the results. But I actually, as it was unfolding, it sounded like a lot to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say that as I was reading and hearing the kids' comments, or reading the kids' comments, not hearing them. It did sound like a lot of work for a class or for those type of children. I was like, that's kind of a lot. And for him to just hold everything till the end and not do those checkpoints or really break it up for them, I think it would have been a lot easier. He probably wouldn't have been as disappointed in the end. He was so excited and just so happy to do it, which is great. At the same time, that kind of was his downfall. I guess he didn't expect him to do such a thing. It made him feel so terrible at the end.
How many of you have done that, have created this is going to be the best plan in the world, and it flops, and it flops bad?
It happens.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that happens.
Go ahead. Do tell. I mean, I don't think we're going viral. We're not going to break the 1 million hits on YouTube like I'd hope. So,
Well, I remember one time, and I think it has to do with just being able, like, being willing to go to the drawing board and kind of retweak your plans, because, you know, your initial plan you think is flawless, and the first time you roll with a project, you think you nailed it, and then you realize you got to make adjustments. But I remember doing the Scarlet Letter with a class, and I know, like, a lot of kids have trouble with that novel, and they find it a little dull, or at least the style of it, like Hawthorne style, kind of drags at points. And so I was like, all right, we're going to do something fun, something like get them a little more active and creative. And I did kind of like a meme project where I asked the kids to pair up and in pairs create memes to represent each chapter as we were reading it. And I did a few examples, and I thought they were hilarious. And I was like, this is going to kill. And the kids just kept trying to use memes that were already created and didn't really like mold them to shape, like, to the novel and involving the characters. And they were trying to do a lot of like copy and pasting of just popular memes on websites, you know. So as I've used that project going forward, I've had to really stress you're creating it on your own. I had to show them sites where they can create memes from scratch, so they're not just relying on copying and pasting and things like that. But the first time I was about to do it, like, even my colleagues were like, oh, that's cool, that's fun, like, they're gonna dig it. And I never really showed them the final product because I was like, it didn't really live up to the expectations.
okay. Okay.
Well, I'm a math teacher, and whoops.
Who's that? Cassandra? Is that you speaking?
No, it's not me.
No, I'm trying to, because I don't see whoever it was.
I don't know if my microphone is working.
No, we can hear you. We just can't see you, but that's all right.
All right. Well, as a math teacher, I always assume, which is really bad, that kids should know or should remember what they learned the year before. So
It would be nice.
Yeah, it would be nice. I teach high school math. So I teach a class of juniors and seniors who have already taken Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. It's called Applied Math. So my thinking was, let me do this real-world application of math and have them budget a vacation, you know, like adults do.
Okay.
And I had this big project, and I laid out I thought I laid everything out. And then as they started going through the project, they're like, I don't understand how to do this. I don't know how to make the equation. How do I graph this thing? And I'm thinking, this is all stuff you learned in Algebra 1, and now you guys have already passed 3 levels of math. So I had to, like, basically scratch the project and go back to like, oh, here's a line, here's how you graph it, here's, you know, like the basics that they should have learned already, instead of learning how to budget and plan a vacation.
How many of you said that to yourselves? Oh, wow, shouldn't they have learned this already?
I think that's like everybody.
Of course.
Yeah.
You know, you think that you sometimes take for granted kids are coming in with a certain skill. And then, so how does that affect your classroom management? How does that affect, you know, I think they're coming in, I've got this great lesson, you know, and they don't have what they need to complete the lesson. So how does that affect your environment that you're teaching in?
I feel it affects. It can upset you, frustrate you, make you. You have to backtrack, go back. That's actually happening in my daughter's class right now. She's in first grade. Teacher was upset that she had to kind of go back and review basically all the sight words from kindergarten, and she couldn't start right away first grade level work because half of the students don't know the main first 30 sight words that they were supposed to know. And I think classroom management, I feel that it will actually, it's going to bore the students that already know them. And it just, it can throw your class off depending on the students.
How does your teacher attitude play into that as well? Your perceptions, feelings. Well, sure, you have to be flexible.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the human side. We're all humans.
Yeah.
You know.
Like
you know, Josh put together a great lesson, and it flops. So it's like, well, how do you? What do you want to do in part? Whose fault is it?
You don't want to take responsibility. You feel like,
No.
oh, I planned this out. These kids aren't doing their part. You know?
Sure, of course, it's the kid's fault. That's your first thing. It's like, yeah, it's not my fault. You know,
or they blame it on the teacher from the year before.
Sure.
That's what I think. You know, actually, my mentor was asking me. She said, "Have you been able to spot out who came from who?" And I said, "No, it's my first year. I mean, I did a maternity leave there before, but I don't know the staff well enough to say, oh, this child came from so and so." But I'm glad that I'm not looking at them like that, because I think it's not fair for you to blame the teacher because the child doesn't know a certain materials. Because I feel that, what about if you taught it and the kid, you know, they regress in the summer, and if the parent is not working with the child one-on-one or providing some kind of tutoring or extra work at home, I don't think that, you know, everything they're learning or memorizing in school is going to stay there. So why blame it on the teacher from the year before? So when she was asking me that, I was like, you know what? I'm glad I'm new, that I'm not looking at them that way. I'm not saying, you know, because I think it's not fair.
And in my experience, like, there's teachers that I know in my department that are just killer teachers, like really good. And I can ask the kids that they've had when I have them the next year.
You can tell.
I could say, like, what did you read last year? And they'll say, oh, we never did any essays. Or, I don't know, I think we read a book or two. And I'm like, I know for a fact they read like 2 plays, 4 novels. I know they did at least 3 or 4 essays, but they don't even retain it. They just do it, knock it out, and forget about it. And I know for a fact, like, those teachers were like working hard with them, but they, you know, if you leave it up to just what the kids remember from last year, it usually falls short.
I'll give you one further, and I know Jeremy said his microphone's not working, but when we just stopped it this year, sorry, a junior writing across the curriculum project. I would ask the kids about MLA, and they're like, oh, we've never done this before. And I'm like, wait a minute. Freshman year, you should be writing some type of formal research paper in MLA format. Please don't tell me you've never seen this before. And, you know, I'll get a paper with, you know, a works cited page, but no in-text citations. I'm like, wait a minute, you know. But then, you know, it's one thing. You could tell the kids that are like, oh, I've never done this before. But there are some kids that are like, legitimately, what's MLA? And then I have to stop and go, wait a minute. So you're a junior. You did this as a freshman. What happened? You know, what happened? And then part of it is, all right, now that's spilt milk now. I can't worry about that because I gotta, you know, if I expect you to do a paper that's in MLA format, I gotta go over MLA. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think you constantly find yourself, you know, assessing, sorry, and reviewing. I don't think there's ever a time where you could just teach, you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to go new right from the get-go. You have to constantly, do you have this skill? Can I, you know, especially in those of you that teach in areas that build upon one another, you know. I'm teaching AP Computer Science again this year. I haven't done it in 3. And if you don't get the first week, the second week's not going to work, you know. So we're at a point now where it's like, I tell the boys, you know, it's an all-boys school, listen, if you don't understand, you have to stop and ask me. No one's going to make fun of you, you know, if you don't get it. And I'm not going to do that. But you have to tell me you don't get it, you know. And that becomes, I've had to change kind of part of my classroom. I almost start doing like, you know, I look when my kids are in kindergarten, I do like morning meeting. You know, I start class. All right, what do we need help with? And almost that might drive what we do for the day. But you know, I don't go in with as much of a prefab agenda anymore because I need to hit exactly what they need. Because I find that for whatever reason, there's not a and they didn't have any experience prior, but I see that, you know, they're almost afraid or not willing to say, yeah, I don't get it. You know, I look at the faces and I'm trying to interpret, is this thinking? I don't get it. Don't call on me, you know, because, I tell them, I'm like, what else do you want me to do if you don't understand it? You just have to tell me, you
Yeah.
know, and I'll go over it. And that's kind of really affecting my classroom environment this year. Because I have to constantly tell myself, ask them, do you get it?
I have a question.
Sorry.
Sure.
No, it's okay. So I don't have any experience like in a classroom. I've never taught before, but like how much of it do you think is like students maybe just trying to see how much they can get away with? Like it's like for the in-text citations example, like do you think that maybe they're thinking that it would just be okay to get away with it, like in maybe like certain teachers' standards are lower?
Yes, in some cases. Now, as someone who went to Berg Catholic, who now is working in year number 14, I could smell it right away. Not at all with these kids, you know. And there are times where, you know, they'll try and get you off track. They'll ask you, "Oh, how was your kid's soccer game?" You know, you know, oh, you know, they know I live in Emerson. Oh, I see, you know, Emerson won in football, whatever it is. And my response is, "Hey, you guys want to come back at 2 o'clock? I'd be more than happy to have a discussion with you. I would love to tell you about, you know, how my kids are doing. I'll even show you pictures." And they're like, "Yeah, let's go." Because they know. I'm like, yeah, please. Because I used to do this. I was one of the ones that would try because we knew what teachers would say what to get them off track. And I think that's part of, see, all this stuff is stuff as a teacher, whether you're a first year or a 30 year, it's stuff that you can't learn in a book. You just have to learn by doing it, you know? And you'll know, sorry, when a kid is legitimate, they got a legitimate question or a legitimate statement, or they're trying to throw you off track, you know. And I think I spent. They came in scared. They got more scared, and now I'm trying to tell them I'm just a big teddy bear, you know. And it's about 50-50. You know, some of them are still thinking that you know, the hammer's going to drop. Like, well, if the hammer drops, it's because you're dropping it on yourself. You know. I tell them I don't give homework anymore. I really don't. Because it'll get copied or it's not really useful for them. So I did give them something earlier in the week, and I had taken some stuff out of a book, but I modified it. So I had a kid come in. I just said, I want to look over your shoulders. I want to see what you've done. And some kids are like, yeah, I couldn't get this one. I couldn't get that one. That's fine. But I know I can smell and I can see something that's plagiarized in programming as soon as I look at it, because I know what skill they should be at in October. I looked at one kid's, and I knew he copied it because I had changed some of the questions, took some of them out, and I changed the wording. So I didn't say exercise, whatever. It says, you know, number 6. And as soon as I looked at it, I said, all right, after class, let's chat. So I made him sit in it for like a half hour. And after class, I said, what do you want to tell me? Because I already know my answers. And the kid started to cry. I'm like, oh, crap. I'm like, so you know what? I said, no, it's fine. It's fine. I'm making the point that I knew. Okay. Just be honest with me. And that's where this went. And the kid couldn't believe that I wasn't going to like hang him up the flagpole. I'm like, I'm not. You made a stupid mistake. But you know what? I caught you making a stupid mistake. He's never going to do it again, because now all bets are off. But like, you made a stupid mistake. It's not the end of the world, you know? But that's why I don't give homework, for that exact reason, because you're just going to copy from someplace else, you know? So I have to make sure I try to make my environment as it's like we never have an opportunity where we're going to sit and go, oh yeah, it's a free period today. No, we work from bell to bell every day.
I haven't had experience teaching at all, and you know, going through some of the examples in the book. I mean, one of the things I noticed is that, like for example, some of the assignments that we had where we were judging, you know, the teacher's performance on by a rubric.
Yep.
it just seemed to me like what they were trying to do was so difficult that it felt really odd for me to you know, to level some of the negative criticisms that the rubric sort of demanded when they were working so hard in other areas. Like I'm thinking, for example, if your class, you know, according to the theory, you should maybe do an assessment at the beginning of the class to find out where they are, you know, what they need help with. But do you really have time for that? And, you know, if the curriculum demands that you cover certain materials, you know, it just seems like in a lot of cases, teachers are between a rock and a hard place, and it's not easy to hit all the points that that a rubric might demand that you hit.
How many of you are teaching in public school now? Your teaching, I see Melissa, Josh, your teaching is a number.
Yep.
Your teaching is, are you proficient? What is it? Proficient?
Distinguished, I think is one of them.
Advanced,
Highly
proficient, proficient, below proficient.
The park standards, like
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and depending on the evaluation model you use, you know.
Which we use Danielson, so either you're effective, highly effective, or partially effective.
Yes, that's what it was. It means you suck.
Yeah.
yeah.
But you know, depending on that model, your teaching is not. When I observe, it used to be, well, it was a somewhat of a subjective view because I would write a narrative. You know, now it's where do you fit on the scale? You know, and I always look at things like, how can I get like a 2 out of 3 for taking attendance? Does that mean I missed a kid? The other, I either do it or I don't. You know, or you know, I it's a lot of things I could see, like I either do it well or I don't do it at all. But I don't, you know, I never got the kind of in the middle. But that's depending on your district. That's what you have. You have a rubric, and exactly what you're doing is how you'll be rated. In most cases, depending on if you end up in a public district, you know, you're a number. So you haven't, but you have an idea of how you're going to be graded, but you know, you don't know. You know, it's you kind of have to teach towards that rubric.
And do the teachers among you find that to be frustrating or difficult, or do you get used to that?
I don't think you ever get used to it. I think you learn, you know, tips and tricks along the way. You know what people are looking for, but you know, every year you're presented with different kids with different struggles, with different needs, and what worked for you last year may not work for you the next year. So it's just, you know, fitting onto a scale is never an easy thing, especially when your students don't fit to a scale, you know?
I feel like when it comes to the evaluations, like the term we use in my department is like the dog and pony show. You kind of like know what they're looking for, like what are the special things. Our supervisor's usually pretty good about giving us a couple bulleted points heading into observations, like make sure this is there, make sure you hit on this, make sure I see a little bit of that. And you know, like that's the kind of stuff that maybe you can't get into every lesson, but at least you get it into the one when you're going to be observed, you know, like you'll meet the criteria and like you usually get a pretty fair result out of it.
Yep.
Like nowadays they're just usually looking for real world application of everything.
Yeah.
Like how can the kid use this in the real world? That's how it is, especially in math. Like where are they going to use it? And our rubric is usually just a bunch of check marks. Like, and if you get all check marks in one column, then you can move on to the next column if you're proficient. And if you get all the columns for that, then you're like accomplished or whatever the next level is. That's just how our district works it.
Like, oh, so for us in the past, like we've had things that were like, they wanted like, there were times when group work was like mandatory. Like they were like, make sure they're pairing up, getting into groups. We have to see that in the class. There were times when it was technology, and they're like, make sure there's some kind of technology, and that the kids are driving the technology, not you. You know, like that they're coming up and interacting. They've given us these like kind of like hot button things that they want to make sure are there, and then they add that into their little write-up. It makes them look like their department's doing what the district wants. It makes us look like we're doing what our supervisor wants. It's kind of like win-win across the board, and then you get back to like doing your regular everyday lessons that usually have some of that throughout the week, but maybe not hitting every single part of that in that one. For us, it's a 41-minute block, a 41-minute period.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a show, I feel like.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Always go. Always.
Well, when I observe, I always like to ask the kids, I'm like, is it like this every day? And, sometimes the kids are like, no, or you could tell, when kids have been prepped. I never tell my kids that an observation is coming. Never. So first of all, no, I never do. I never do. And you know what? I got to tell you, I tell it every semester. God, this had to be around 2010, I think. I had 4 kids in AP Computer Science. Principal's observing me. And there was one kid out of 4 that was just, for whatever reason, he picked the day I'm getting observed to be a knucklehead. And he was just, sorry. He's acting as immature as he can. And he wasn't trying to throw me under the bus. He just, I think it's, everything, all his hormones and everything were getting the best of him. And the one kid who was the student government president, he turned to him, and the principal saw it. The principal didn't say a word. He turned to the kid, and he looks at him. He got his attention, and he goes like this. Look at my camera. He goes.
Wait.
And the other kid was like,
wait, what did he do?
Look at me. That was the greatest compliment I ever got in all my years of teaching, because the kid took ownership of the other one and said, dude, he's getting observed. Like, come on, I mean, thankfully, I've never been thrown under the bus, by a group of kids when I'm getting observed. And I look at that as a big compliment that, they think at least highly enough of me, because there are some times when it's like, oh, you're getting observed. It's party time, and think about how that influences your classroom. I do agree a lot of times it's a dog and pony show, sometimes, people ask me, oh, I want to do this with technology and all that. I'm like, oh, we're getting observed. I'm like, yeah, why? Okay. Because, you wouldn't do this ever. So sorry, that's a big, that contributes to your environment too.
No.
Or also, I've heard like when you do an experiment or a project, and the kid says, "Oh, like I've never seen that before," and then they put you on the spot. I've heard of that before.
Yeah, if your kids like you and respect you, there's never, I never have to worry when I get observed, because the kids are generally pretty good, and if they also know if they're not, I think it's going to change the landscape of the room. So.
Master Speedway.
So we got away from Scott Donovan. That's okay. The conversation is definitely good. My kind of thing is that, how many of you are any of you career changers?
Yeah.
We're doing this show. Wave at the camera if this is this is new. This is a second career. Okay. So you're energetic like Scott Donovan, and you're all excited to do this, and all of a sudden it doesn't work. So now what?
I think it's like hard not to be salty the rest of the time with that class, because you like, especially at first, like the first couple of years, you take it really personally, because especially, with like his scenario, he thought he had this great plan. He was going to do this diagnostic based on it. He was really trying to like better the class and get them all on like better footing, and then it kind of comes back and bites him, or doesn't go anywhere, and he feels kind of crushed by it. But the natural response is to then like look at the group differently and kind of bring that with you going forward. Yeah. But you kind of got to shake it off,
I agree. Otherwise, you'll be more miserable than when you started.
and you'll just get it back from the kids. Like you start going in there with a chip on your shoulder towards them, they pick up on that, they start kind of giving up on you in the classroom, and like it spirals out into like negativity, you know.
I agree. What do we I like question number 4. I forget which ones I gave you, but which is Scott, if I forget what I gave you. What should you do about the kids that plagiarized? So even better, if it was you, what would you do with the kids that plagiarized?
Personally, because I've been in this scenario with plagiarism before, normally our school policy is automatic 0. You tell guidance and they call the parents in over it.
Okay.
So what I would do is tell them what the policy is, and then say, I'll give you an opportunity. You can now do the work on your own time, maybe give them an extra few days to like actually get it really done, and just say, I'll give you a 60, like a D for it. So it's not a flat 0. It's not an anchor on the semester. You still save a little face, but you're definitely not, like, no matter how perfect it comes back, it's not going to be a passing grade, you know?
Okay.
I
Anybody
agree.
else?
I think like everyone can make a mistake once, especially if it's like, if it becomes a pattern, then I think it's like obviously way more of a problem. But I think we have to like also be understanding that people can like find themselves in difficult situations, and it could be like the night before something's due and you forgot, and like we just have to be like understanding. And I like the idea of like just barely passing them as long as they do it, like not giving them a good grade, obviously, but like giving them an opportunity to redo it and hand it in for like a 65 or whatever is like the minimum passing grade. But if they ever do it again, obviously, like then it's a bigger issue.
Okay.
I've done the same thing with like lowering the grade. I mean, a 0 kills a kid's average. Like there's no recovering from a 0. But if you give a kid like a 60 and, you know, you speak with them and you sit down with them and you explain to them like what was wrong and, you know, how they can go about fixing it so it doesn't happen again, and they take away, you know, a lesson from it, then you did your job. I mean, if they do it again, obviously, like once, shame on me, twice, shame on you. You know, there's definitely, at that point, you give them a 0, you call in the parents. But
Sure.
I think everybody does make mistakes, like you said. And, you know, if you can make it a learning experience and turn it into something positive for the student, then that's, you know, I guess the best case scenario.
I think also that, you know, the teacher, Mr. Donovan's kind of tied his own hands by making this particular project worth, I think it was either 45 or 55% of the grade. So, you know, again, it kind of limits a 0, you know, on a project like that, that's 55% of the grade is huge. I mean, if he had done it in increments and caught something like this, you know, maybe he could have gone with a 0 and taught the lesson and still not, you know, had a little flexibility to allow the kid to recover and learn the lesson.
I think that part of it too, even as a second year, that's something that as a supervisor, I would kind of catch. 55% for one assignment is a lot. And I know that we've kind of, at least where I am, we generally try to make sure that we spread out our assignments. There's not too much of one thing, or there's not, you know, or there's, you know, there's not too few assignments. There's enough and enough variety of assignments. So that's not just tests. It's not just, you know, one big project, which is totally different than when I went to school. You know, because I was only telling my class yesterday, like my one geometry class when I was a sophomore, it was 3 tests a quarter. That was it. You know, so I think there's to try and tap different learning styles and different kids what they're good at. You know, just doing tests or just doing like a big project. I don't think that's the way of the.
Or like Tom Cannon asked to turn.
I'm sorry. You know, so yeah, it's you really have to make sure that you have a variety of assessments and make sure that it's hitting. You know, they're all not stuff that's upper level. You know, that you're kind of addressing the medium, you know, of the class. So, okay. Yeah, and I agree, Christine, that a zero might not, you're not going to learn. You might see that's, if you have a kid that cheats, well, how do you make them not do it again? And I can remember in high school, and I still admit this, and I don't have a problem because I was also 15 or 16 at the time, but I couldn't cheat in a class where I respected the teacher. Number one, that was very tough, almost impossible for me to do. But number two, it was very easy to cheat in a class where the opportunity presented itself.
Absolutely.
Teacher doesn't get up from behind a desk. Teacher gives the same test to 5 classes. When you make it that easy, then it's it's almost like I can't not cheat because it's so easy to do it. As and I think I found myself in more of those situations, and thankfully I never got caught. But I found myself in those situations because I'm like, this teacher is going to sit there for 40 minutes and we're going to take a test. How can I not have any type of aid with me? Have my textbook open in my backpack, leaning against the leg of the chair, any number of different things, playing multiple choice, 4 squares with my foot to the guy next to me. I mean, because it was so opportunistic, and I think that was, that was part of it. But if I respected the teacher, I couldn't do it. And I think maybe Scott Donovan, we don't know the rapport, and that's why I want to. This fits nicely with classroom management. Is how do you build that rapport so that even if they have to cheat, they don't do it.
I think just letting them know. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
2.
I feel that me especially with the little ones, I believe that just making them feel like it's okay, just like it's all right if you don't know the answer, it's all right, or if, like actually this doesn't have anything to do with tests, but we use this thing called a pink slip. So if you don't do your homework, you get pink slip, and it says like I did not do my homework, I left my textbook, or it has a list, and you have to get it signed by your parent. So I found it in his desk, and I'm like, wait a minute, and I completely forgot to make a sign list thing. Right, the next day I need to make sure that he brings his pink slip signed. So I found it days later, and it was like shoved in his desk, and I said, why is this here? I completely forgot, but I was expecting for you to bring it back. And he was so nervous. And I said, you know what? It's okay. You don't have to bring it home. I'm going to let it go this time. Next time, just promise me you're going to do your homework. If not, next time I'm going to make sure that, we call mom and I feel just, you not even, you want to put fear, but not even fear. I don't want to say that because you want to make them feel comfortable enough. So even if they don't know the answer to a test, their eyes are now wandering on other students' paper. Like you don't know it. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, and I don't think our kids overall are getting that enough. They hear, oh yeah, cheating's bad, but they don't get, the I had a girl in Iona, this was, oh God, a while ago, a bunch of years ago, who I think had an opportunity to cheat on a midterm. And I walked over to her to ask her a question, almost unrelated, and she goes, like, the mousiest voice, she's like, oh crap, because she was looking up answers on the internet as she was taking the test on the computer. And I was kind of like, okay. So I let her finish the test. When she was done, the waterworks started, and maybe I'm a softie for anybody that cries. But and I've learned with cheating, like, talk to me. You've got my full attention now. Talk to me. Tell me why. Tell me why I shouldn't give you an F right now and send John your way. And ironically, I think it was another student who ended up showing me. She went for sincerity or otherwise, but she put on Facebook that night. She's like, I am so stupid. Like, she was lamenting over this, and I think I still believe she was sincere about it. But my concern, if I catch any kid that's cheating at any level, it's like, talk to me, tell me why, and I'll let them give me everything, and half the excuses I might hear are nonsense, but sometimes that's the opportunity that kid needs to vent all of it. Here's what I've been bottling up for God knows how long, and I need to get it out. And this was the way I could do that, because someone is at least going to listen to me. Are there times where I've given a no remorse kid a 0? Absolutely. But when I hear things, and especially in the college classes, because I've had issues on both levels with academic dishonesty. Okay, tell me why I don't fail you right now. My policy used to be you cheat once you fail the class. But then I've had situations where I don't think I could have pulled that trigger because the kid didn't deserve it. So that's the tough part too. And this is not in your methodology book. It's not in, it's not anywhere. You just have to do it. You have to, what do I do? When you catch a kid cheating, what do I do? Could I yell at him and make it miserable? Yeah, absolutely. But often you can't, and I found you can't make, especially the boys that I teach all boys, on the secondary level, you can't make them cry instantly, and when they do, that's sincere. They're not making it up, because these boys will not cry in front of one another. But if they cry in front of me, it's legitimate. Like, I need to listen, because they are almost raising themselves in an environment where it's not okay to cry by any means. That's weak if you cry, and for a kid to break down in front of me, okay, let's potentially take now the whatever punishment is off the table, but you got to tell me what's going on, because obviously there's something if you're sitting here sobbing in front of me.
But what about if they don't cry and they're being sincere?
Well, and I should say that I'm not looking for tears, but I am. I mean, you could tell sincerity. At least I think I can. In now doing this 18 years, I think I can really smell sincerity. And if I can't, then shame on me. But I think it's. I used to. My initial thing was, oh, you cheated. It's almost like I'm looking to get you. And it's not the case anymore. It's like, maybe this kid cheating is some kind of cry for help. Whatever it is, I owe it to the kid to at least find out what's going on before they decide to tell me, or before I decide to impose some type of punishment or sanction or whatever.
Can you give them another chance? Like, have them rewrite the paper? Because that would make him regret doing it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's and you as a teacher have to figure out, does the kid deserve it? Does a kid, is it a 0? Is it you're going to learn your lesson? Is it I'll meet you halfway, give you a 50? I'll make you write it. And even if it's the best paper in the world, still getting a 50. That's up to you. And I can't say what I would do, because it really depends on, it depends on the situation and who the kid is and what they've done. And, I found that it's almost like every policy I have is like, okay, it's at my discretion, because I can't say, here's the policy for, if this is the infraction, here's the punishment, because, when I put things in perspective, and when, when things come out, then it's okay, now this is different, and oftentimes I will say, I'm glad I had this discussion, because my thinking an hour ago and my thinking now are totally different. So either you're very good at playing me and I'll tell them, you're very good at playing me, or I believe you to be telling the truth. And generally, most students, when they have the opportunity to come clean, they will. At least I think so.
I think it also depends on who the student is. Like if you already dislike the student, it's very hard to be fair and say,
True.
you know what, I'm gonna give this child a chance, because if you already know this is a kid that's always like bullying, or you grow this kind of, I don't want to say hate, but you're going to feel some type of way towards that student, and we're humans, and we say we gotta look at everyone the same, and but in reality sometimes we could become judgmental because of who the person is.
I agree.
So I think it's very, very, it's a tough situation because it just depends on who the student is.
And generally, that's why, I look at, if you look at totality, a kid that homework, class on time, participates, all that becomes you get out of jail free, in my book.
Of course.
But a kid who's, the opposite, it's a different story.
Yes, absolutely.
But at least I would like to say, I want to at least hear what you have to say, because, I've seen too many times, or I've heard too many times where, a kid, a colleague will say, oh, hey, I'll say, oh, all this does is sleep in my class, doesn't care, apathetic, lazy. And then you'll hear like, oh, he's got to work to support his brother and sister, or he babysits, or because the single parent works, whatever it is, makes you feel like you're this big. But not having that context, it's it's different. So I think the more context you have about your students, and the more you know your students, the easier it is to handle this kind of stuff too.
Absolutely.
So, do we think Scott's a good teacher?
I think he is, because he put a lot of thought into his lesson, and I think he cares.
Okay.
I think he cares, definitely. I think he has what it takes to be a good teacher. I just think he's still refining his skills, like, sharpening the tools, so to speak. And I think with just more experience, he will maybe start to look at it like, I was putting too much off to the end. I need to do those like checks along the way. I need to understand, like, one of the things I noticed with this, the novel stretched through Christmas break, and he just gave them Christmas break as like, hey, you could use that to like catch up on stuff. Kids never catch up on in my experience, they never catch up on stuff on Christmas break. And if you're using that as like the buffer for them to like get extra work done, you're fooling yourself. That's something you would do your first year because you're like, yeah, that's a great opportunity. But after a few years, you're like, no one's doing work on Christmas break. Stop lying to yourself. So I think like those kinds of things, like that's going to like shape him, like, as he goes forward. But right now he has the skill as far as like content area. He just needs to get a little more skill as far as understanding what the students he's working with,
Yeah.
I think he took it a little too personally too.
Why is that?
I mean, I understand, like, you put a lot of time and effort into your lesson and you want your students to be as excited about it as you are. But I think if every time you're going to get so bent out of shape, if your students don't reciprocate that excitement, like, you're going to have a hard time in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I agree with the, forced excitement. It's, you're going to do stuff they don't like. And you're going to do stuff that you thought they wouldn't like, and they go crazy over. But I've learned first of all, I'm not the teacher I was when I started teaching, but I've also learned that sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's okay to kind of let if the class kind of moves moves the class, how the class shapes its direction. That's okay. And sometimes if, depending on what subject you're teaching, if you can, like now, we've talked about Scott Donovan here and there. We've kind of tangented, but I'm okay with that. Like, nothing that anybody's saying is like, really pulling us away from the overarching theme of classroom management. So I'm okay with that, and at the end of the hour, I'm going to say, well, was it a productive discussion? And I'd like to say yes. And sometimes it might be productive, even though it had nothing to do with where you started. But, if I've got active, authentic learning and thinking and all that going on, I'm good with that. Any other closing thoughts about Scott Donovan, classroom management, cheating, anything else that we can talk about?
One thing I think Scott would have been able to kind of help himself out with is if he took more time to listen to what the kids were kind of whining about, if you want to call it whining. But the kids, as the project was being assigned, they kind of gave him an indication that, like, this might be a little much. Like, and sometimes that's just whining because they don't want to do a damn thing, and I get that happens. Yeah. But sometimes, even when, like, the really motivated and really, like, high achieving kids kind of give you what? We got to do all that by when? That might be a good barometer of, like, hold on a second. So you also think this is a little too much too soon? Maybe I need to adjust course a little bit.
Yeah.
It was overwhelming, I think, because it was such a large project, like, given at once, that maybe if he had given it in increments, it would have been a little less overwhelming and the kids would have been more receptive to it.
I agree. When I give extra credit and the kids, and I'll say it's like 30 points on your average and they don't touch it. Why not? It's too hard. It's not worth my time because I'm not going to get it to work. So I'm not going to do it. And to me, that was a huge slap in the face. Like, hey, you're setting the bar way up here where, you know what, maybe they just need, 5 points and something simpler they'll do. So I definitely hear that.
I also think too, there wasn't a set guideline for them to follow. It was very open-ended, which I get. Open-ended projects are great. Allows the kids to be free writers, to have creativity. But a lot of times kids need guidance and guidelines, and they need, to see sometimes even a sample. So I think if he would have just provided that to his students, he might have had a little less plagiarism because they would have been more familiar with what he was looking for.
And even actually completing the assignment yourself as the teacher. I'm doing that with all the programs I'm giving my kids this year. I'm coding them myself, to see where they have difficulty. And some of them I'm like, oh wow, I'm asking too much. I got to tone this down. AP or not, they're going to get hung up on this. If I get hung up on something for hours at a time, they're not going to get past it. So you really have to, something like that. Maybe it's, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the assignment, or I'm going to try and do it and say, how involved would this be? Because even if I write the assignment and I spec it all out, still, if I don't do it, I might not really appreciate what the students are going through.
Yeah, and he said too, it was like a hard read. So he knows it's a hard read, and he knows the kids are going to be challenged. There's nothing wrong with a challenge, but you then have to modify and accommodate where necessary.
Yeah, like in my English class, if I know it's going to be something that's tough and it's really going to be like an uphill climb, I try to make sure the assessments and the activities we do are a little more like light and involving, and try to involve some fun into it. Whereas if the text is a little easier to deal with and like might be more enjoyable on the enjoyable end of things, then I don't mind being a little more like hard fast on just a straight essay and make it a little drier as far as the assessment goes, because the material is kind of like providing some of like the enjoyment of it, if you will, you know.
True. Any other thoughts? We've definitely had a lot of good ones. So for the week now, you're done. Okay, you were here. You know, an hour's worth of time of thought, whether you talked or not. It's fine. You're good to go. So there's nothing due for you next week. You know, unless the people that weren't here, obviously they have to respond to the questions that I posted. But for everybody else, piece of cake. You're good to go. I hope it was enjoyable, that you can actually, you know, come away with something. I don't do this. I won't do this again in the semester. Certainly, if you need to face with me for anything, you can. But my vision of the course is that it's asynchronous, that you should be able to work at your own pace and not have to meet me on a weekly basis, because, you know, it's, even though we're all, I think for the most part, I think we're all in some type of home environment. Although I think Samantha's in, I want to say I think she's in Jersey City, because I see the whiteboard behind you. I was going to say I don't think you have a whiteboard at your home.
Yeah, I'm still in Jersey City. I came out of a class.
So yeah, that's secret safe with me. We won't tell your professor. But you know, it's, I just like to get you exposed to this kind of stuff, because not only can you, you know, do this as a student, but potentially as a teacher, depending where you end up. You know, this is certainly, you know, I would love for someone, every semester I ask the same question, please tell me how this was different than a classroom experience. And I've yet to hear someone say, oh yes, it was terrible for me to have to sit on my couch and, you know, talk about classroom management for an hour, as opposed to being in a classroom in Jersey City. So, and plus, you know, I would have gotten run out of town, the amount that I'm coughing. I'm not spewing germs through the computer. So, you know, you're, in that regard, I think it's a good thing. So I'll be the last one to leave the room tonight. If anybody has any questions or anything they need out of me, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. But other than that, I think you're done. I'm going to stop the stream. Have a great night.